Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 111 of the podcast. In this episode, I talk with my friend Tom Bump, and we talk all about big churches, small churches, multi-site churches, single-site churches, kind of like what are the similarities, what are the differences. He's recently moved from working mostly with churches that are probably under 800 in size in one location, which is most people, to a church that's larger, 5,000 in size, multi-site, 5 campuses. And I think a lot of times there's just misconceptions about what is the same or what is different with churches of different sizes. And there's a lot that's different. We didn't even talk about this, but there's a great article by Tim Keller about church size dynamics that we'll try to link in the show notes. But so churches of different sizes are certainly different, but there are a lot of things that are same. There are a lot of things that you might experience in a small church that you could experience in a large church if you were intentional. And the same is true the other way. There are a lot of things that, and Tom talks about some of these specifics, things that can exist in a large church or probably more frequently exist in a large church, but could exist in a small church too if we as leaders would make it happen in a different way. And so that's kind of what we talk about with Tom. We get to explore his personal journey in 2 different settings and what's the same. You'll not be surprised, I don't think, of what he says, some of the things he says that are the same in the 2 different churches that we're talking about here. So I think it's a great conversation, very helpful, especially if your experience in church world has largely been in the same kinds of churches, like if you've always been in smaller churches or larger churches or, always, for the most part, been in single-site churches. Most people haven't always been in a multi-site church, obviously. But I think it's very helpful. There's a lot we can learn from each other, from different types of churches, and I think this conversation illustrates that. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to remind you, if you're listening to this the week it comes out, my friend Kenny Conley, who was on the podcast last week, his course Ministry Hacks registration closes soon, and the course starts real soon here. So if you want to be a part of that, if you'll learn all the different ministry hacks that he teaches in there, 33 of them, and I'm sure as you get in, it'll probably end up being like 45 or something as you learn from other people, and he thinks of other things. I've learned a ton from him, and all kinds of things that I apply to our ministry as well. So if you want to sign up for that, we'll link that in the show notes too. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Tom Bump about learning from different sized churches, the experience, and different types of churches, and how we're really similar and how we're different. Well, today we have Tom Bump back on the podcast. Welcome back, Tom.
Hey, it's good to be back with you, Nick.
So the last time you were on was episode 40, which feels like a long time ago. Okay, so that's like well over a year ago. So give us an update on your life and what's happened. Some things are definitely different. You've moved, you're working in a different church, all that. So give us an update on where things are.
Yeah, well, first, congratulations on all the episodes. I enjoyed some free coffee. I appreciated the Dunkin'. I'm a Dunkin' guy, Starbucks.
You're a Dunkin' guy. Okay, gotcha.
I confess I probably enjoyed it twice, maybe 3 times.
Oh, nice. Go for it. That's all good. There's no limit.
Hey, I kept challenging other people to get on there and get it, man. Nick's giving away free coffee. Anyway, yeah, life has been up and down, as always in any kind of ministry life that we all go through. But yeah, since recording, I've shifted focus in a church. Changed ministry positions to now where I'm actually about an hour and a half south of where I was before when we recorded that last episode. Changing in position. Before I was focusing on just children's ministry, but now I'm in a multi-site church, 5,000 people or so. I've got 5 campuses, getting ready to open up a 6th. I'm part of one of the smaller, newer campuses, but I'm serving as the family life director. So I'm overseeing Cradle to College, and also developing the parenting ministry, and being part of both the student ministry team and the children's ministry teams that work as a global team as well. So we're kind of all together, and we work together, and I'm the old guy on the team, work with a lot of young great, talented, incredibly talented student directors and children's ministry directors. And so it's an honor to be the old guy on there. Try to throw out some wisdom every once in a while. Hopefully I don't annoy them too much. But they're a great group of people. And they love the Lord. They love their students and children. And so it's been really cool. It's been an exciting experience to get, having served in a lot of small churches, to get now to be a part of a mega church, but also have a small church feel. Cause like I said, our campus is around 350, 400 people. So, and growing.
That's great. And that's what I want to talk about, is really dive into maybe two things. One, what's it like to go from most of your churches you've worked in, which you'll tell us about in a little bit, have all been in that 150 to, let's say, 800 in size. Mm-hmm. And then now you're this church that's larger, but you're at a small campus. So right. I think that'll be interesting to talk about the differences there and the kind of similarities, the differences, and how you can kind of use experience from both worlds, where you are now, or if you were in a small church. But then also going from being the only staff person in, let's say, children's ministry to now you are part of a team. But right. I think one of the mistakes we make is most people listening are the only staff person at their church in their role, in their ministry. But we make the mistake of doing ministry alone, which we don't have to do, right? Yeah. So I want to pick your brain about that. But to kind of set it up, give people an idea of what most of your experience has been like in children's ministry up to this point. What have the churches been like? I know there's been multiple churches, but what has the setting typically been?
Yeah. I've served in churches in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and been a variety of different churches in sizes. Like I said, from 100, 150 people with a children's ministry of like 25, on a great Sunday, to churches that were 800, 900, where we had 150, 200 kids on a Sunday, and sometimes working with part-time paid staff, other times working with complete volunteer staff. Sometimes I was the only staff and I was the only leader and had just a team of volunteers that I was leading the charge with. So it's been a variety. It's been cool that God's given me the opportunity to see behind the curtain in a variety of churches. So I kind of see, and I've been in churches that have grown really fast, and I've also been in churches that stayed the same the entire time, pretty much, just a shift of people. And so, it's been unique. And then the current situation I'm in now, like I said, part of a multi-site, but our campus is only 4 years old. And, we're running 350, 400, and we're growing. We've got 100 and some kids coming now. Our student ministry is growing really fast as well. In fact, it's doubled in size. Both middle school, high school has doubled since I've come here, and that's just been really crazy. So I've gotten to see, like I said, behind the curtain in those kind of churches, and that's been a unique experience that I know some kid ministry leaders don't get. So it's given me some wisdom to understand how both groups work and how to utilize the strengths and weaknesses of both.
And I want to talk about that, the similarities and differences, strengths, weaknesses, but give us a little bit more about where you are now. So the church overall averages about 5,000 attendance, 5 campuses. How big? I'm assuming there's one campus, the original campus, that's pretty large.
Yeah. Our main campus is right around, I think it's around 2,500 to 3,000. That's the biggest. And then the other campuses, we still have one that's still portable, meeting in a school, but they're working on a building right now. The other campuses are all in established buildings. We even have a building. It's a small one. It was, a renovated church. So there's a lot of challenges with that, but, each one, I think the others are running, between the 800 to 1,000 mark. I say, and we'll be launching the 6th one here pretty soon. And they've actually already got a building, that they've found. Okay. So nice. That's pretty cool.
I've seen a lot of churches. We had LCBC staff on the podcast one time. People do different things. A lot of churches are all about with portable. And then I've seen a lot of churches, but if they're a little larger, especially, decide they're going to go permanent facilities with their multi-site, which is a big shift. Obviously, you're talking about a lot of money you got to spend to launch a campus, but I've seen that a lot. Now you're the family life director at your campus, so kids ministry and student ministry. What does the team look like beyond that? Like, is there a central team and a campus team? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, we have a central family life director, and although that position is currently vacant, but we have one that's there, who will oversee both children's and student, to oversee the strategy, keep everything tight, keep our teams focusing together. But there's a student directors team, and then there's a children's ministry team, and that we meet globally once a week to go through things, to talk through things, to make sure we're all doing very similar things, but yet we have a lot of freedom in our model to custom build things that will fit for our campuses. So it's we try to stay in the general. We're all doing the same strategy. We're united there. We do some of the similar events, but then again, like I say, being that I'm in a smaller campus, I have some things that I can't do that other campuses can do. And so I have that freedom to customize it, make it work for me and my context. So, but yeah, so we have that global thing going all the time, which is powerful because, all of our prep work is done through a central campus. So that takes a lot of things I used to do as a children's pastor off my plate, and allows me to focus on team building and some other things.
That's good. So let's talk about that. Gives people a good picture of like where you are now. And anybody listening who serves in a multi-site church probably gets that. But for those of us that don't, it's helpful to just get an idea of how that works. Cause I do want to dig in a little bit to like the team dynamic, what you spend your time on, what you don't spend your time on, all that. So let's just start with some of the similarities. You work in all these different churches. Most of them are under 800 or 900. Now you're at this larger church that's multi-site. So that's two big differences, right? A church that's 5,000 and a church that's 800 are very different. But a church that's multi-site and a church that's not are very different. But what are some of the similarities? Like, you know what? That was exactly the same. Maybe it's a little bit different, but it's basically the same. Give us some of those.
Yeah, what's going to be funny, and a lot of people are going to maybe not believe this, but volunteers.
Oh, yeah. I get that.
Is the same everywhere you go. You're never going to have enough. They're never going to be all committed the way you want them to be or whatever. And so right off the top, I'm going to throw that out there. Like I said, I often sat in that smaller church thinking, man, if I only was in a bigger church, I would have all these volunteers. Let me just pop that bubble loud and hard right now. It doesn't matter. Even at our biggest campus, they struggle for volunteers. They struggle with positions, sometimes having to think about closing a classroom. So the reality is that's a similarity that's all there. I think another similarity is that people will do more than you think they will if you ask. I've found that to be very true, that when I've been in small churches and I ask something huge of somebody, they dive in and they blow me away. Where even in this bigger church and the bigger churches that I've been in, when I've had to ask people to dig deep and to go long and hard for me, they've been able to do it. And that's been very impressive, that when you find those people that love children's ministry, they will go at it hard that way. So other similarities, I think, just that you can do a lot of the same things in a small church that you can do in a big church. It's just on a different scale as far as like decorations and props and fun themes and all that. You can still do it. I found that to be a similarity, that I've not had to change anything that I've done in the past. I can still do some of the same things in a bigger church that I did in a smaller church. It's just at a different scale in some ways, but it's still the same. I'm still doing, some of the same goofy programs that I used to do. And they work. And so, I think those are some similarities. I think, like I say, getting connected with parents are still just as busy in a big church as they are in a small church. And getting them to connect and to relate with your small group leaders or children, Sunday school teachers is still just as big of a challenge. as it is in other ones. So those are a few things I think that are pretty similar. You know.
How about differences? So tell us about some things that have been different. And you've probably how long have you been there now?
Well, I've been in this new position since December of 2018. So
okay, so or December 2017, I guess. 17. And obviously there are differences, but you've also, I'm imagining there's some things you've had to adjust to that are different. So there's probably the difference, and then what you've had to do, in kind of reaction to that. So tell us about some of those.
Yeah, I think for me, moving from a single church to a multi-site, that's been huge. Learning that I don't have to create every single thing, that Central takes care of a lot of prep work. We have an amazing lady who leads a team at our Central office that preps all of our curriculum stuff. She literally has the most incredible resource room you've ever seen that is insanely organized. I mean, you hear the angels singing when you walk in there. Like
it's like a children's pastor's dream. You should take a picture and we'll post it or something.
I just wanted to stand there and bask in the glory of it all because it was just crazy. Well, then she's got this team of people who come in and they prep for all 5 campuses, and they've got bins for every campus has a color coding, and I'm prepped for the next 2 months. She's got the next 2 months curriculum already in bins. I've got it all stacked. So all I have to do every week is walk around to a classroom, put the bin in the classroom, and that's my prep. Now everybody else is going, I hate you. I know.
True.
Trust me, I had to cut out all those pieces for the preschool craft. I used to have to do all that. So I keep thanking her volunteers over and over again. So I think that's one difference. I think the other difference, too, is the fact that sometimes there is a thing that we have to do globally, and I can't tweak it. I have to just pull it off as a global mission, as a global initiative. And that can be hard because it could be something that I'm not super comfortable with, but I have to do it because that's part of what the team does. So there's times where I have great freedom. There's other times where I have no freedom at all. I have to do it as part of the team. And that's not a negative. That's just, it's different.
I'd love to interject there because I'm just wondering, it's not at all what we're talking about today, but for anybody that is in a multi-site context, or especially if they're exploring it and they haven't quite figured all that stuff out, how do you know how well, how is it communicated? This you have to do, this you have freedom. Is it certain? I'm sure there's some kind of general framework, but when it comes to something specific, do they say something like this is a, I don't know, must do, I don't know, whatever, something like that?
In our team meetings, they'll make it pretty clear from the leadership that, hey, this is something we're all doing together. We're all doing, Community Impact Day, where we're canceling services and going out and serve. We're all doing extravaganza for Easter, and this is how we're doing it. This is the program, the format you follow. There's certain programs and themes that we all do, and there's no flexibility there. So I've had. But
it sounds like that's the one that's not the norm. It sounds like the norm is there's some flexibilities and freedom, but every now and then they come in with something like, "Hey, this is church wide. We're going to do this." That's good. Yeah, I just wanted to dive in there because I feel like a lot of, especially multi-site churches of 2 or 3 campuses, most of them have not defined those runways really well, right?
Yes.
So it's not really clear what is free, what's not. Not just specific things, but even bigger things like curriculum prep, resources, whatever, when you're editing curriculum, all of that. And so I think that's a good step for anybody in a multi-site church is let's get more clarity about it. And then when we have specific things that are not part of the normal plan, let's just make sure we talk about it, over communicate kind of thing.
Yeah. That's and good. So it is an adjustment for somebody who's been, the lead guy. I mean, when I've been in charge, to come into a place where I'm not in charge, it's an adjustment to try to have to figure out, okay, I've got all these great ideas I want to implement, but I have to pass them up the line and run them up the flagpole, so to speak, to see if they fit the overall strategy. And then if I do something different that the other campuses don't do, it can cause a pinch sometimes. So that's been an adjustment for me to say, well, yeah, I want to do this program or this initiative, and the other campuses aren't. But again, that's where thankfully the family life director, he has that role to kind of help balance that out, to say, yeah, you can do that, or yeah, you probably shouldn't do that right now. Let's hold off. Let's talk about it as a team and see, maybe we can work this as a whole team thing, and make it global rather than just an individual campus specific thing. But yeah, it's nice because we have our whole family life calendar planned out. And so there are things that are global initiatives, and then there are campus specific things that we get to do. So that's been something I've had to adjust to, and that's definitely been different, where before, I could just run and gun. I could plan things sometimes on the fly, spontaneous. There's not, in a multi-site, that's one thing that there's not as much spontaneity. It's planned. We've got our family life calendar planned out really almost for the next year already. Yeah. As far as, even for our emails that go out to parents and team members, those are on the calendar already. Our training events that are both campus specific and global. And so that's been a big adjustment to get used to, because like I said, I'm used to planning the calendar myself, putting events, coming up with new ideas, trying new things. I don't have that ability to do as much of that. So it's been a little different, but then again, it's kind of nice too.
Yeah, there are always benefits, right? There's always benefits and there's always downsides. Like I think of we've had Clay Scroggins on the podcast, and he'll talk about North Point Community Church is like a cruise ship. Like, there's lots of benefits to a cruise ship, but it doesn't turn very fast. What I mean? It's not very agile. It doesn't do a whole lot of different things. There's just a lot. You got to get a lot going just to move it, just in a slightly new direction. There's a lot of things that have to happen, right? So that's one of the downsides of being a larger church. And then multi-site, I think, just adds another level of that. What are some other differences that you've experienced and maybe had to adjust to?
Yeah. Well, like I say, I think, the whole global thing, that's been a big one. The prep stuff's been big. I think another difference, for me is just, like even budgeting, learning how this fits into a global budget, not just a campus budget. And again, having to think through, how my finances affect other campuses. And that when I ask for things and they may say, no, you can't do that right now. That's because there's other initiatives going on at other campuses. And so I've had to adjust where, I had a set budget in the past. This is what I could spend. Don't overspend. And now that's totally different, how it's set up and how it works, and the pre-approval process of things, is totally different than what I've had in the past. So finances, just communications, running things through. We have a communications department. And so I have to run all my emails, text messages, everything goes through comms to make sure it's formatted right, reads right, proofed, which again, good things, because I'm not an English scholar and I don't spend a lot of time, with punctuation.
So tell me a little bit. I'm just curious. Give me a little bit of insight as to what that's like. And again, I want everybody listening, and we'll come back to this later. But if you are a single site church, or if you're a smaller church, either one doesn't matter. Listen through the filter of how could I apply some of these same things in my church, even though I don't have a staff person. And we'll come back to it. But specifically, how does that work? You send an email to someone, they send it back to you edited?
Yeah. Yep. If I'm going to send out a weekly parent email, which we do, I will type it up, what I want it to read, what I want to say. I send it to a lady in our central office. She proofs it, make sure it reads grammatically, make sure that it's formatted correctly, and then shoots it back to me with it saying proofed, and then I can just copy and paste it into my email and shoot it off. Which is funny. I'm glad you said that, because I would say to somebody who's in a smaller church, you can have a comms department, find somebody who's really good at English, and say, hey, would you proof my emails before I send them out? That's honestly, that's what I used to do. So it wasn't a big, I will say that wasn't a huge difference. In some ways, the formality of how they do it is different, but I used to have somebody help me with that, because I knew I would write like I talk, and which isn't very good sometimes. I'm a constant run-on sentence.
Nice, like a paragraph sentence.
Yeah. And so, I would ask I had one of our admin team, I had another volunteer that I could shoot stuff off to and say, hey, would you proof this for me? Check this out, check my notes, make sure these read well and all that. So yeah, you can do this with a small, if you don't have a staff, find somebody that, find a homeschool mom that loves to do this kind of stuff and give them a ministry. For sure it can be done. But yeah,
we did that too. Up to our church was about 800. It was a volunteer that, proofed all the parent emails at least.
Yep.
And then, came back and edited it or whatever, which was great. So you send it, that person's a comms person for the whole church, not just for family ministry. Yeah.
Right.
And you get it back. Is it a pretty quick turnaround, or do you have to cause that's another thing about bigger churches, multi-site churches, you got to get planned farther out, like you said earlier.
Yes.
Is it a pretty quick turnaround, or do you need to be like a week earlier than you used to be?
No, it's a pretty fast turnaround. Now they've just made some changes for us, that I just learned about last week when I was at camp. So now I've got to have a little bit more lead time. They're asking for a little bit more. When I first started here, I could send an email at 8 o'clock in the morning to her, and by 10, I'd have it back proofed, sometimes even faster, just depending on the day. But, so it wasn't a major inconvenience, and it definitely gave me the confidence to know that when people read my email, if they read my email, which we all know.
We all know we know what that's like. Yeah.
The open rate is not real grand. But although I have learned if I text people and say, hey, there's some important news for you, check your email, I'll get a better open rate. I don't do it every week, but I've been learning that, especially with my student ministry parents, that if I want them to read an email, I've got to text them and say, hey, read the email, give them a link, or something, and then they'll go check it out. So that's been, that has been an adjustment to just get together to give a little more lead time with the things that I write. Can't be so spontaneous. But again, I think that's a good habit for any person in any size church. Cause I think that's a huge mistake most of us made, was that I didn't plan out far enough in advance. And I think when I was by myself, I was running and gunning. I was too spontaneous. I used the excuse that I wasn't organized. I didn't have that gifting, to say, well, I'm going Mach 3 with my hair on fire. And that really wasn't the right thing. That wasn't, the Bible says we're supposed to do things decently and in order. And I wasn't doing that. And I got convicted of that when I got some coaching and started working harder at planning things a lot farther in advance. I got to the point where I was doing it about 3 to 4 months out, which I thought was pretty good. So I didn't quit and I didn't give up saying I can never do this. I just got determined and said, I'm going to do it. And my mentor kicked me in the butt several times, and who my mentor is.
Oh yeah.
And, he would kick you in the butt verbally with love.
And physically. I was going to say physically too.
Yeah, he might.
If you were around. Yeah.
He might. I have never seen him do that, but he might. But it was I needed it because honestly, it made me a better children's pastor. When I would take the time to be intentional about what I was doing. And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed. And this is not a criticism of smaller churches, so please don't take it that way. But I do see that in a larger church, they are a little bit more intentional with their calendaring. They stick to that calendar pretty tight when it's on there. Now I will say they also can overbook their calendar.
Yeah, sure.
So that's back to a similarity that the calendar doesn't get lighter when you're in a bigger church, and sometimes it actually gets a little heavier. And I know that a lot of people on our teams say, wow, we've really got to make our calendar a little more simple because we're overworking volunteers. We're over committing, people like crazy. And so we're trying to be more intentional this year. We've really started to look strategically at our calendar and go, what are the most important things we can put on this, and what things have to stay off? Because that's it can tear people up and it can burn people out real fast, both staff and volunteers.
I've had this conversation a couple times in just recent weeks, really, where part of it is at a larger church. Don't even think larger church. If you used to work a job where it was just you, if you were self-employed, if you whatever. And then now you work for a team, it's just different. Things do take longer, right? Because you have to communicate things you never have to communicate before. Like you'd never had to communicate if you were going to be off that day or not, or, if you needed to book that room. I mean, you just did whatever you wanted. And the same is true. The larger a church gets, the more you have to communicate, the more you just naturally get planned out, because people, hopefully it's not some, whoever books it first gets it kind of scenario, but there is a push to be further planned out so that everybody can play together well. It's just harder to work as a team, but better, right? I think it's better, but it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, when I came to this church, they had this whole system, and thankfully they changed it to something a lot simpler, because they had like 3 different systems for one thing. And I'm like, they're wanting me to learn all these different programs and tools. And I'm like, wow, this is nuts. I mean, and now we have one thing. So like if I plan an event, I go in, I can get in, I can book rooms, I can ask for communications to make postcards for me, where I was doing all this stuff by myself before. So that's an advantage that I have now. I can say I want postcards to mail out. I want postcards to hand out. I want them by this date. But again, I got to be way out. I got to give them plenty of lead time, to do this. I can book the rooms. I can, if I need food, I can plan for it. And then this sends out communication to the building guy, so he knows when to make sure things are unlocked. If I need something set up, it gets set up. So there's, but I had to learn this program to learn how to put everything into it so that it got onto the church calendar. And it had to go through an approval process. Sometimes they'd kick it back and say, hey, we need clarification for this, this, and this. So it's made me be a lot more intentional. And again, I think that's a good thing for anybody. If you're working alone, you need to be thinking through all these things anyway. And then you also need to look at, hey, okay, who can do this better than I can do, where I can give it away? There's got to be somebody out there that would like to do setup stuff, that's got time on their hands, that could set up a room for me. There's got to be other people who would like to design a postcard, and come up with the graphics, for it. I think sometimes I let myself think that because I was in a small church, I couldn't do those things. And then as I started going and I started getting more determined and more intentional, I started realizing there are people out there that have these gifts. I just have to ask them to help me out. And I stopped prejudging people, and I started asking, hey, I need your help with proofreading. I need your help with setup. Can you come in and do this for me? If I give you a diagram of what it's supposed to look like, can you do it? Oh yeah, I'll do it. And that was really cool. I found out people were willing to do that, but for a long time I lived in this, nobody's going to help me. I'll just do it myself, because that's the way it has to be.
All those little things add up. Like each one may not take that much time, scheduling a lunch or, I don't know, writing content for a postcard or whatever it might be, setting up a room. But then you add them all up and it's like, wow, that is a lot of time. And now for you, so you used to have to do that. And that's what I want people listening to think about too, is what are things I do that I could get volunteers to maybe help with so I can spend my time elsewhere. So I want to ask you, you have a little bit of this now with this multi-site structure, and you're on a staff team. So there are other people that do certain things you used to do. So what do you spend your time on now? And I'm guessing it's better. It's more ministry. It's more people. It's more relationship, right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm at the place where, it used to be I was in front of the kids, I was recruiting, I was training, I was scheduling, and the vicious circle. I get to now, in the place that I'm at, even though I'm in a smaller campus, I'm still in front of the kids a little bit. I still get to teach. I teach both students. I'll go into the student ministry, teach on occasion over there. I'll do large group time for the kids, or I'll even jump into a small group sometimes just because I want to coach a small group leader. And so I'll go in and spend a weekend with them, and work with them or just observe. And so, yeah, my role now, and I'm fortunate because this is something that God really has put on my heart to be more of, is someone who gives back. I've had so many people pour into my life and coach me and mentor me and speak words of truth and show me how I can do things better, that's what I want to do. And that's kind of what I've committed the rest of my ministry years, however long God gives me, is to help younger leaders and other leaders, older or younger, to break through some of the walls that they set up, that I set up. Cause I know they're setting them up because I set them up. And we all are very similar in that. And so now I get to spend time, I get to recruit, but I also get to really equip and to train and to appreciate. I spend a lot of time just talking to volunteers, getting to know them, thanking them for serving, more about who they are than what they do. And that's really cool. I'm thankful for a church that allows me to budget funds so that I can take people out to lunch or dinner or coffee and really invest in them, give them some resources, to help them be better at what they do. And so I really love this role, that where instead of spending my time cutting out preschool props, I'm spending time with the preschool leaders, helping them be the best preschool leaders they can be. I'm working with coaches now. I'm building a team, so that I'm not the only one. Right now, I'm the only one. But my vision is that as the ministry grows, I'll be hiring a children's pastor. I'll be hiring a student pastor, and I'll be overseeing them, and coaching them. But in the meantime, I'm going to raise up volunteer leaders to be those people. And so I get to spend a lot of time just investing in others, and helping them get a heart for ministry, and a heart for servant leadership. And I love it. I mean, it's really is kind of a dream job. I could be, a family life pastor, next gen pastor, and oversee, the global team, but I love doing this and I love contributing to the global team. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. I don't have to be the whole head guy. Yeah. But I can contribute to these younger leaders that I work with because, like I said, I love pouring into them and encouraging them and watching them and cheerleading them. But I also love in my own campus being able to do the same thing on a campus level. Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt that, and again, somebody listening might disagree because of their setting. And so this isn't true everywhere. But if you have a central role, that's by nature, it's a more system, structure, strategy, behind the scenes, less people interaction role. Right. It equips people like you at the campus level to be far more people-oriented, relationship-oriented. So if that's what you're wiring and that's what you love, then you're going to love the campus role. If you're more of the behind-the-scenes, not as much a people person, kind of person, yep, then you would love a central role. And that is one of the beauties of multi-site churches. You can play to strengths that way, whereas most churches, you have to be both, right? Like I fake being an extrovert fairly well, but it's because of all, have been in churches, in our church, the church I grew up in our church when we started it, certainly being smaller, and that never goes away. Like there's never a point where you're like not a people person, right? Because if you worked for a central person who was not a people person at all, well, then all the staff would hate that person, right? So it's always a mix. It's just what's the balance? And it sounds like you're in a great spot where you get to use more of your gifts and your wiring, and it's more about people and relationships and all that, which is great. How would you, for somebody, for most people listening, they are the only staff in their area. But as we've already alluded to, you don't have to have a large church or staff or multi-site to be able to do some of this stuff. So what would you recommend for someone who probably could hand off some things, or how could you help them get a little bit of that, what you're experiencing in their setting in a church of 200 or 500 or something like that, where they're the only staff?
Yep. First thing I'm going to recommend, get a coach. And Nick, I'm going to recommend Nick's coaching program. He didn't pay me to say this, but I firmly believe he's got a great mastermind group. It is like a coaching program. You get to be with other leaders. You need to get around other people, or you need to hire a coach. I do coaching. There's other great coaches out there, ministry coaches, that find somebody who fits your context, fits your personality, and get the help, because that way you have a sounding board and you won't feel alone. So get somebody to walk with you. You'll go a lot farther and faster. First off, then start looking at what you do. I'm working with a person right now, a children's ministry leader, fantastic leader who, in fact, just sent me a list of everything they're doing. And so now we're going to go look at their priorities, and we're going to say, what are your priorities? And then we're going to start prioritizing some of these things. And then I'm going to say, okay, what should be on your to-do list and what should be on your to-don't list? And everything that should be on your to-don't list, I want you to start thinking of somebody who God's gifted that can do this better than you. And I want you to intentionally go to this person and say, I need your help. Here's what I need you to take this over for me so that I can be the best me I can be and lead well. I need to do that. And so I'd say if you're the only staff person, hire your volunteer staff. Go ask your senior pastor, say, hey, I need an admin help. If you're not gifted in admin, I stink at administration. I'm terrible. But that doesn't mean I quit on it. It just means that I know I've got to find somebody who can help me think through all the little steps. I can think of the big rocks, but nobody wants to jump from big rock to big rock to big rock. Sometimes you got to take those little steps to get to the big rock. And it's safer that way rather than, you can visualize the river and you've got 5 stones going across. Well, they're 10 feet apart. Good luck jumping 10 feet. I'm a big boy. Yeah. I'm jumping 10 feet. So I got to have some small stones. So I don't always think of those small stones, And so I need somebody who does think like that. So I found somebody who loves to think about those kind of things. And I'll say, here's my dream. Here's what I want to accomplish. Here's my end goal. Here's where I want to go. Here's the big things I can see already. Now help me think about those things in between those big stones. What do you see? Where's some deadlines that I need to put on my calendar? Help me out here. And God has never failed to raise up somebody that, he always promises, I'll give you what you need. So ask, say, God, I need an admin. I need a creative person. I need a proofreader. I need a creative. Maybe you are the admin, but you're, or hey, God, I need that people person. I need somebody who will love on volunteers, who's creative, comes up with great volunteer gifts, so that I don't have to. Again, I'm not a foo-foo-y person, as I call it. I don't think of those cute little things but I dive into other Facebook groups and I look for ideas, and then I find somebody that can pull it off and say, here's what I want, make it. and
here's a picture on Pinterest.
Good luck. Yeah. I mean, Pinterest gives me hives, but I know people who love Pinterest, and I'll say, go on Pinterest and here's a listing. Here's what I'm looking for. I want to bless my volunteers. Here's how many volunteers I have. Can you help me out? Here's my budget. And let them go. So I think the mistake that I made as a small church pastor was I thought I couldn't do things that other bigger churches were doing. And that's wrong. You can. You just have to be creative. Sometimes you may have to find the funds for it. You may have to find somebody who could donate because you don't have the budget for it. Well, go find somebody that would bless that way. Because I bet there'd be somebody who would say, yeah, I'd invest in your volunteers for you. So I think those are some of the things that when I was the only staff member, I had to get creative and ask God to show me what I was really good at and the things that I had to let go of. And my pride would hold it in and say, well, they're too busy, or I'm the only one that can do it, or it's going to take too much time to show them how to do it. It's just easier to do it myself. Those were all lies. I honestly believe they were lies. The enemy kept me bound up and stressed out and tied up and tired out. And so I broke through all that. And now I'm always asking, I'll ask my team, who's somebody that's good at long range planning? Who loves to plan big events? And I'm handing stuff off left and right because that keeps me going. And it allows me to stay focused on the other things that I'm really good at. And so I would just encourage you, if you're in a smaller church, leverage those other gifts out there. The body is gifted in so many ways that you aren't. If you're not utilizing them, I'm sorry, straight up, that's your pride. Get over it. Get over yourself. Let it go. And I'm saying that with love. Really I am. But I had to do this too. I had somebody tell me, why are you holding on to all this? You think you're Superman? don't stop. And when I started to take a good inner look at myself, I realized that's what I was, and I needed to let go. And I'm so thankful. I'm building a team now. I'm starting with some elementary coaches. I'm working on some preschool coaches, and I'm giving them different parts of the ministry to take care of. They're going to send out postcards and phone calls to each of my small group leaders every week. I want 2 or 3 leaders getting a call just to check up on them. How are you doing? Not how did the class go? How are you doing? How can I pray for you? What's going on in your life? What can we do for you? Are you getting connected into a small group? Are you being cared for? Is there something we need to know? Do you need a break? We're asking those kind of things because I want to take care of my team. I want them to love serving where they are. I want people that are on other teams to be jealous of what and how we take care of our team. But I need people who see those kind of things because I don't always see it and I can't be everywhere. So the more help I get, I just look at it as, hey, Jesus didn't, even though he could have been everywhere and he knows everything, what did he do? He got 12 guys, and he really invested in 3. So why can't we do the same thing? Even in a small church, you can find 1 or 2 people to come alongside you and be a right hand and a left hand. So anyway.
And I even think about, and I want to point this out too, because I don't want people to miss it. You mentioned the lady that works at Central that does all the resourcing. Oh, right. And she's got the amazing, angelic resource room. She's staff, right? She's staff. She's yes. Central Kids staff, I imagine. Yes. But she had a team of volunteers, right? She has a team of volunteers. So it's not any different. The church is bigger. So the main leader is staff, but anybody can have that. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the hardest volunteer roles to fill in a church, I think, is the resource person midweek for like a ministry or something, children's ministry especially. But you can. You can absolutely do it. I see churches that do it all the time. So that's just one example of yes, you have it in a staff way there, but even she needs volunteers. It's like you said, the need is the same in a larger church. It doesn't go away. You still need volunteers there.
In my last church, like I said, I started doing everything. I literally would bring home stuff to cut out with my family, and we'd sit and watch TV, and we would have a cutout party. Well, my family hated those cutout parties. And then I started going around, and I don't remember where I heard it from. It wasn't my original idea, but somebody said, hey, how about inviting some families to come in and do the cutout stuff? And I'm like, brilliant. I found a couple homeschool families. I found 3 families in particular. One that would do my preschool grades. I had one that would do kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. I had another. I had just an individual lady who did my 2nd and 3rd grade, and I had a family that did my 4th and 5th grade stuff. So I broke it up amongst multiple people, and each one had one area to prep, and they could take home. I mean, I had somebody who even ran the copies. I ran the masters. That's all I had to do. Hit print for the master copies, put them in folders. That person divvied them up to the people. And so I created my own resource team, basically what I've got now, what one person does.
Yeah.
I had 8 people, but I had moms bringing in their kids as a homeschool project, and they would work together during their school hours and take an hour and prep. So it can be done. There are people there. I mean, the resource person we have here, she has people who will just come in, grab the stuff, take it home, and there's a retired couple that goes and they like to cut out stuff. So that's what they do. I had somebody tell me once cutting out stuff was therapeutic. I just call it. If you say so. I call it sore fingers. I have those indentions of scissors on my fingers, But it's crazy. So I think, listen, if you're, like I say, if you're in a small church, don't be discouraged. Don't think the grass is greener. I'm giving you a peek behind the curtain. It's not. It takes a lot of work, even if you're in a bigger church. But the one thing the bigger church is doing is they're leveraging volunteers really well. And I know that's what we're doing more and better here than what I did in the past. We're very intentional about trying to get more volunteers to do it.
That's good. Well, how can people connect with you if they have any questions? And you also, like you said, you provide coaching, but you also provide coaching for parents. So I want to mention that because you can coach church leaders, but also parents through an organization. So tell us a little bit about that and then how people can connect with you if they have any questions.
Well, like I said, I'm all about building the kingdom. And Nick, thanks for letting me come back on. I always enjoy our conversations. I'm on Twitter at PT Bump. I also have a sort of a blog. It's not as active. Like I said, I'm not a prolific writer, and you will find grammatical errors on my, because I have not had anybody proof my blogs. So it's pretty much right from my heart, straight when I get inspired. But ptbump.com. But that also has where you can link into my coaching ministry. And I do parent coaching with the National Center for Biblical Parenting, and it's a great series of basically an 8-week program that we walk parents through to train their child's heart. It's been fantastic, the transformations we've seen. I'm currently coaching a family all the way over in India, and it's been really cool to watch them as they've been specifically working with a 3-year-old, 4-year-old little girl, but they've got 3 other kids, and they've seen the transformation, not just in their child, but in them. And that's been a real blessing. And I'm thankful that God's allowed me to use my experience of a dad of 4 to pass that on. And that's what I'm about. I'm not an expensive coach, and the only reason why is because I'm not trying to get rich on it. I'm just trying to build the kingdom. I just want to reproduce all that God has blessed me with, and hanging out with people like you, Nick, and Jim Weidman and Carl Bastian and so many others that have just poured into my life. I'm just trying to give out because I just want to continue to see more reach for the kingdom. So, so if they can message me. Kid Ministry Collective is my Facebook group. And we have a podcast too, called the Kid Ministry Collective Podcast. And so there's ways that people can connect up, and I'd be happy to help if in any way possible.
Cool. Well, thanks for all you do, and you got to talk to that family in India right now before they go to bed. So we'll get you off
for that. So
yeah, we'll get you off the podcast here. So thanks, Tom. Appreciate the time.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
Well, there you go. Tom had to run to coach that family, those parents in India, missionaries who were in India serving, which is just great. So here's some action items I think of coming out of that interview. Hopefully, regardless of your context, whatever your church is like, large or small or single site, multi-site, I hope you found some things that you could run and do that you could apply in your church. One of them, doesn't matter what size your church is to make your to-do list and your to-don't list, like Tom mentioned. That is a great exercise. I think that's something all of us could do at least yearly, and maybe even every 6 months, where you just make a list of everything you're doing, that you have to do, everything that other people could do, and you start delegating some of that. There's even like I've used the version of everything only you can do, a list of everything others could do. Again, not that they can do right now because you might not have someone, but if you had the right person, who could somebody else do that job? And then it's usually there's a list of a few things that you should just stop doing altogether. Like nobody should do it. And not because it's bad, but because you need to spend that time on something that's better. So make your to-do and your to-don't list. Recruit someone to do a job that you do. It doesn't have to be a grand, huge job. Maybe it's something that's an hour a week. Is there someone that can do a job that you're doing? This is one of those things where, it's hard to recruit volunteers. It's hard to ask a volunteer who's given an hour and a half or 2 hours a week to give another hour and a half or 2 hours a week to something else. But it's not hard, I don't think, to ask a volunteer who's given an hour and a half a week to give you 15 minutes more a week to proof an email, right? And again, that might not save you a lot of time, although you could ask them to schedule it or do different things depending on what email system you use, but it can make your ministry better. So recruit someone to do a job that you currently do. Get coaching. Tom mentioned that. Didn't think the conversation would go there, but that is really important. He talked about Jim Weidman in there at the end. That's the coach that he was alluding to, who's a great coach. And I just think all leaders that I know of have coaches. And I think about the coaches that I've had. In fact, one of the coaching networks I've been in a couple times, my coach recently started a Facebook group for people who have been through it, in the past, which is great. Because so now I'm in this Facebook group with people who were in my group, but then people who weren't even in my group, but it's another just place to talk and bounce off questions and get pushed and challenged and all of that. And for me personally, I love one-on-one coaching. I think that's great, but I enjoyed the community where I got to learn not just from my coach, but from other people. And this fall we're launching kind of, Tom alluded to the mastermind groups, which we did last year, but there's some big changes coming up with what we're going to do this fall that we think are going to be even more helpful to you and to us as ministry leaders. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that more soon, but it does fall under this banner of coaching. So I agree with Tom that that's definitely something you want to do if you can, and everybody can. You can get a coach within your church. I mean, you can find somebody to be a coach for you or to participate in some type of group like the ones I've been in that help you grow together with a community of people. You can get all the links and notes and everything we talked about in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 111. I'll let you know. I don't know at the time I'm recording this, so I'm going to let you know that I tried to get Tom to get me a picture of that resource room so we could put that in the show notes. So we'll see if that makes it in there or not. But you can check that out, nickblevins.com/episode 111. Thanks for listening. I hope this helps you lead better in whatever context you're in and realize that we're all part of the same family, the same church, and there are differences for sure. There are strengths, there are weaknesses for sure, but we can learn from each other and we can be better together. So until next time, hope you have a great week. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.